Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Bob Unger, and I've got a really special guest here who I've been watching from afar on YouTube. And I'm a real estate lawyer, and I deal with a lot of real estate brokers. And I got to tell you, this guy is, as I told him, the ultimate oxymoron, an honest broker. He doesn't just do the usual, oh, this is the time to buy. He tells you the truth. And when you think about it, why would you want who's going to be your agent who doesn't tell you the truth and blows smoke up you know where? So you can appreciate what's about to happen, because I'm going to hit on a lot of issues with Scott. Scott is located in Santa Barbara, Southern California, which has gone through a tremendous bubble, much more than New York, although New York is also a bubble, because when you create money out of thin air, you create bubbles. It's only a question of degree. The bigger the bubble, the bigger the pop. Very simple. So, Scott, I'm going to hit you with these different points and try to address them one by one, because they're the kind of things that most people are saying, but you're not most people. Okay, let's start with number one. Oh, the inventory is so low that this could never be like 2008, because there the inventory was high. What say you?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on it. It's always great to be iron sharpens iron. I really enjoyed meeting you and having a conversation. So it's an honor and a privilege to be with you today. And I hope anybody listening today gets something out of this. And I'm pretty sure they will, because like you said, really as a real estate guy who works in real estate, I just knew instantly when the market started exhibiting bubble behavior that was a big warning. But somehow the narrative was this time was different, or was normalized. It was a casino climate. It was take your pick, right? I mean, there were so many things that just didn't pass the smell test. And even somebody who is benefiting from that, and I live like out here in the West Coast, right? The Wild West, the playground for the rich and famous. If anybody could have normalized this, I would have been somebody that would have been very geared to normalize this. And I intend sales meetings every week. I work for the biggest brokerage in the world. I work and own real estate, but I don't pay my bills purely with commission checks. I believe, and because you're a real estate attorney, real estate is in fact the path to wealth. But it's not necessarily by earning commissions. It's owning, holding, and operating real estate. But for whatever reason, I was on YouTube during lockdowns, like most of us, and I saw somebody giving real talk, and I gave my 2 cents, and then the rest is history. And here we are on YouTube now with a pretty big presence as the straight talking real estate agent from California. And as a result, now my network's reached nationwide. I'm helping people with their real estate needs, and my primary mantra is, if you want to get on the sidelines, I'll earn your business later. If you want to sit this one out, I'll earn your business later. And that's not a narrative that's common, that we're geared and trained in the real estate industry as salespeople. Our job is to get you to buy now. So during all that euphoria, that was pretty much the case. And so one of the many narratives, well, due to supply and demand, answer to your question now, is due to a lack of supply, there's still going to be demand. Real estate will continue to appreciate because of that lack of supply. Well, even now, as supply is in fact accelerating at an alarming pace, outpacing previous bubbles. We're breaking all the wrong records. The supply and demand thesis doesn't hold water anymore, because even with limited supply, this is scary, it's outpaced demand. Demand is falling off a cliff. So the supply and demand theory isn't holding water anymore from that very basic fact alone. Even with limited supply, which is accelerating, the demand is already fallen off the cliff. So we're seeing now the dominoes start to fall. Every real estate market is local. Some are going to behave differently. Some will be the first to get hit. Some will be the last to get hit. Some will be the first to rebound. Some will be the last to rebound. But that's in fact my position. that I have in terms of inventory, supply and demand, and trying to hang your hat on the hopes of that sustaining the bubble. I just don't think it's working at the moment.
Well, Rick, I mean, I'm sorry, Scott, rather. I was thinking of Rick Rule. Spoke to. The next thing they say is, Scott, the economy is so great. Just ask Joe Biden and Janet Yellen that there's going to be massive demand from all the money that people are making because business is so great. What say you?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it's the government's job to really cheerlead the markets. And I understand this is kind of, you're either on one side of the aisle here, one or the other side of the aisle. It's either we're potentially headed for a recession, or we're going to have a soft landing. Well, of course, any government official in a political climate has to cheerlead this, especially with elections around the corner. And, I understand not wanting contagion to spread. And, if the government was to come out and actually give real talk and tell us what was really going on, there might be widespread panic. I believe that's how serious the waters that we're currently in. So I don't believe everything, if anything, that those two, Yellen or Biden, are telling us at the moment, because I just think there's too much political gain. And I think it's narratives that are spun. And so, yeah, I mean, this is one where we really look to YouTube and real life people with boots on the ground, temperature checks. My position has always been, you could have got away with a lot of the stimulus, but when you overstimulated the biggest asset class in the world, the U.S. housing market, we put ourselves at tremendous risk. We could have got away maybe with some stimulus checks, maybe with some eviction bans, maybe with some mortgage forbearance, maybe with some unemployment benefits. But when you overheated the U.S. housing market and let it become a runaway train that left the station and it's not coming back, had they risen interest rates the first month it exhibited bubble behavior, maybe we could have not suffered the blowback that we're potentially going to suffer now. But for whatever reason, whether it was on purpose or on accident, that's in fact what's transpired. So now it's buckle up, strap in. Do you want to bury your head in the sand and believe what people in power want you to believe? Or do you want to maybe expect the unexpected? And people always say it's better to be prepared for something, have it not happen, than have something happen and not be prepared. I think it's time to be a level-headed realist. I'm not saying be extreme this way, extreme that way, but try to, read between the lines and look between the cracks and just stay level-headed within that. So, yeah, I mean, I think you as well. We know that they are pretty much mouthpieces, borderline puppets for their party. And we've seen everything they tell us just be completely contrary to what, in fact, we see with our own two eyes. So I think a lot of people are not having a lot of faith in leadership, and specifically that leadership.
Well, the next thing they say, and I'm just looking at a flock of ostriches talking, they say, oh, we had so much stricter lending standards this time, so this couldn't be anywhere within the vicinity of 2008. What's your response to that one?
Yeah, that's another really popular one, isn't it? Last bubble, my position, I was saying, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this out. It's like when you open your show, bigger bubble, bigger blowback. That's just, typically what happens. So to escape the blowback of the biggest bubble ever produced in history would take it'd be the first time ever. So I wouldn't, if I was a bet man, my money couldn't go there. But yeah, that was one of the things that I heard early on, was that this time is different. The last bubble was due to ninja loans and loose lending, and all the loans written now are much stronger and blah, blah, blah. But that's starting to kind of fall on its face too, because even with the low interest rate, let's say you bought in the bubble, well, you're now upside down in your purchase. That's not fun. I'm sorry for the people that are suffering that, but I've walked in those shoes. So, I know that you might learn some really good lessons and come out the other end and not regret it because of what you're going to learn. But even if you got that low interest rate, when the government's job is to fight inflation and their tool is the interest rate hikes, and what that's doing now is creating job losses, and it's attacking the white collar wage earner, the tech industry, and just the white collar wage earner. And in a recession, jobs start to go away. So even your low interest rate, if you can't make your payment, that strong loan isn't going to help the nation if they're losing their jobs. And then if equity is no longer there, they can't sell the home, or even if they can, for what they paid, we're still going to see mass inventory. And I believe that, those are some of the things we have to take in account at the moment. Is just because the loans might be stronger in a recession, people lose jobs. So even if you had 0% interest, which you don't, we know what happens. It doesn't take a rocket science to figure that one out.
And how do you sell to the next guy when his mortgage rate is going to be so much higher than yours? How does that happen?
Well, yeah, there's only one way to fix that. Prices. The prices are going to start to adjust, and we're seeing that downward trend already occur. So, the interest rate isn't as important if, in fact, it pencils out. And the only way it's going to pencil out now is for prices to now start adjusting, which they're doing. So now we're going to see the equilibrium be brought back into these markets. If we can tap dance and tiptoe and dance on the razor's edge and complete that with a soft landing, it'll be the first time in history. But the realities are, we can look at the areas that are leading the charge in price reductions. The ones that got euphoric are now reversing course in spectacular fashion. The Vegas, the Phoenix, the Miami, the Boise, the Denver, you name it. I could go on and on and on. Throw a dart at a map, you're going to hit a metro that's now reversed course and doing it quicker than what happened in 2008. So for anybody that's I would really be very aware of what's going on out there. For me, as a real estate guy and a trained salesman, I work with clients all day. I'm out there. We're making offers right now. It's always examining at today's interest rate with the standard down payment. Will this property's cost to own be cheaper than its cost to rent by enough to make an offer warranted? And then let's test it with an offer. Let's see their level of motivation. Are they stuck on the market? Are they going through price reductions? Are they unwilling to pull their listing? Well, let's throw them an offer and not fall in love with the house in case it gets rejected. Because time's on our side now. There's no urgency anymore. So that's what I try to. Most people don't think like that unless they're investors. And as somebody that just wants to see people win in real estate and earn not only their first purchase, their second, third, and fourth, that's the kind of way where I'm poised, to kind of guide people if possible.
We're talking to Scott Walters of Scott Walters Real Estate, located in Santa Barbara, Southern California. And I want to now address some of the things you've also been talking about, namely commercial real estate and the strip malls and the shopping malls and the stores, which, of course, during the COVID scamdemic, what I call it, shut down the average middle class or upper middle class owner, entrepreneur, destroyed him. But of course, the Wall Street companies, the Costco's, the Walmarts, somehow they were open because I guess the so-called virus doesn't operate when a company's on the stock exchange. And so what have you seen? What is the fallout? What is the damage that you're seeing out there in commercial properties?
Well, you hit the nail on the head. It was really unfair because due to the pandemic or whatever you choose to view it as, if that's not really important, where your viewpoint, we'll get out of the problem and in the solution. But you're right. It's squashing the mom and pop business owner. It squashed them in spectacular fashion. Then you and I, our tax dollars, we gave PPP loans to all these big companies, including, I'm willing to bet, the Walmarts, the Targets, the Home Depots. They all probably took these PPP loans themselves. But the realities are, you're right. I mean, now all you see is these corporate entity companies. They're going to control the market share. And all these small mom and pop shops are ghost towns, empty. The retail environment's been decimated. The rents that these commercial properties once capitalized, nobody can make those pencil out anymore. Now you're seeing these weird kind of performance-based rents, anything to do to bring somebody in to the space. But if you can't make your payment, you're in big trouble. So I've heard some recent reports that commercial mortgage-backed securities now are starting to default in spectacular fashion, and it makes sense because in the stimulus era, we were propping up a lot of businesses, holding them up artificially. But now that stimulus is gone, they have to make their payment, and they can't. So they're moving out. The only people that seem to be able to make a go of it, maybe, are these chain, fast food or Starbucks or these corporate entities. But in terms of being able to swing the rents needed for a startup or an existing company that managed to stay in the space, they're all being just ushered out in the big institutional Walmarts, like you said, the companies that are on the stock exchange. They have deep pockets, possible political ties, more than likely, are now not only surviving, they are thriving. And now what are they doing? Because the recession is being now ushered in intentionally. So even they're starting to feel a little bit of a decline in some of the revenue. But what do they do? Well, that's no problem. Start laying people off, throwing people overboard to protect their bottom line.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a vacuum. It's just going to be a vacuum and take a lot of jobs and people and homes and cars and everything along for the ride.
If you recall, Ben Bernanke, another great genius, was talking about the wealth effect. And so, he helped to blow up this bubble so that people saw the price of their homes and properties appreciating, and that made them think they could go out and spend like the proverbial drunken sailors. And now all of a sudden, they're finding that they've charged, we just hit a record in consumer debt. Because when your house is going up psychologically, you think you're rich, even though that gain is not a realized gain. It's strictly on paper. And what is the way in which you address that issue?
Well, you kind of just did in a roundabout way. That's kind of what happened here during stimulus and the housing bubble, leading the charge of being the number one offender in overstimulating the economy. Like I said a couple questions ago, had we avoided the housing bubble, maybe we could have survived a little bit of this with less blowback. But the number one offender was letting the housing market spin out of control. For years, they kicked the can down the road. They could have risen rates. Initially, they should have. Somebody, like you said, a smart man like Ben Bernanke would have risen interest rates. Hey, listen, everybody, the housing market's exhibiting bubble behavior. If we lose it, we lose everything. We're going to be thrusted into a recession, possibly a deep cycle recession, quite possibly a depressionary level of a recession is going to be ushered in if, in fact, we lose the housing market, because it exhibited not only just bubble behavior, extreme bubble behavior, the biggest bubble behavior ever recorded in world history. You would think somebody would have the wherewithal to say, we need to stop this. Like, okay, stimulus money, whatever programs, but this housing market thing is out of control. So what happened to us? Well, appreciation, overnight appreciation that never seen before highs created the wealth effect. And on paper, the unrealized gains, people felt rich. I got all this wealth. My house was, I couldn't tell you during the stimulus era, but when the Kool-Aid drinking was still going on prior to interest rate hikes, I'd be on the tennis court or wherever I was. And these millennials, I'd be, circulating around the courts too. And we'd strike up conversation and be like, yeah, our stock, what stocks are you in? I'm in this stock right now. This stock, it was a casino climate.
NFTs, crypto,
whatever. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with diversifying your portfolio. All I know is real estate, and a limited amount of maybe some safe, low risk, ETFs or whatever. But the realities are the wealth effect is now being removed in spectacular fashion. So I always say, as a trained salesman, because I know once I can get you make up your mind to buy, the sky could be falling. I can get you to buy.
I know in California, there's some people whose houses have gone up, let's say, $1 million from what they were in sections like Beverly Hills, etc. Little tiny houses, bungalows, really. And now they really don't have much money and they have a lot of debt. So the only wealth they really have is their house. What do you think of the idea for someone who's in his retirement years doing a reverse mortgage if they're living in a house that's appreciated, but they don't want to have to move and go into another situation? What do you think of reverse mortgages?
Well, yeah, I don't know or have a ton of experience, but my basic view of a reverse mortgage is maybe if I'm old, I have no options, I want to live out my days in the home, maybe a reverse mortgage can work. I don't know, how much success I've just recently went to a listing appointment on a multi-million-dollar shack here in Southern California. And the guy, probably my age, he was living with his parents still. He had, I think, had cancer and he was stuck at the house, but he was also the caretaker for his elderly parents who died within months of each other. So they had a reverse mortgage on the house. And the bank was coming for it because they basically timed it pretty well, with the exception of their grown son with a health condition had nowhere to live. So it really depends, like there's a lot of variables when it comes to a reverse mortgage being the right thing to do or not. Maybe if I had no one to leave money to, my asset, to an inheritance, well, I may as well chew up my equity rather than let it, go to the state. But yeah, that the reverse mortgage is going to be a very, very unique, individualized, look. It's not, I don't think it works for everybody. I think you really got to take a look at what's going on. Why do we need this?
What do you think of this whole Airbnb thing that has come front and center in the last 5-10 years? What do you
It's a trend. It's like a trend, a fad, another high-flying tech company that got euphoric and now is suffering the blowback. I mean, millionaires didn't get rich buying their house. They got rich buying other people's houses. But this is almost like a hybrid crypto for the real estate industry in a sense, because see, typically, and I'm old school, I guess, but I learned from my dad and I've just learned, long-term rentals, you don't get hurt in real estate when you buy, you get hurt in real estate when you sell. So you kind of want to hold. So long-term tenants are what you want. Tenant turnover is not what you want. And Airbnb is basically high turnover, but trying to, charge a premium for that. So I think the challenge with Airbnb, well, first of all, they're being restricted where a lot of areas won't allow you to run an Airbnb. And then two, if you have a recession ushered in and then people are no longer spending the way they once were renting Airbnbs, and you now have to turn it into a long-term rental, but you can't because your payment is too big, you might be in trouble. So I know Airbnb, I've been, seeing and reporting on, is not looking good for a lot of the Airbnbers out there. So I've never ran one. I don't own one. I've never helped somebody buy one. So I guess it's fair to say I don't really know, like, or a fan of Airbnb at the moment.
What do you think of this issue of the average person, according to the statistics that I've read, about 60 to 65% of Americans are living hand to mouth. In other words, if they lose a paycheck, they can't pay their bills. In fact, a very high percentage of people who make six figures are living that way. And I find that my formula for real estate used to be, and this is when I bought properties in Florida, I was buying properties for 10% down, 75 grand for a new, what I call a bread and butter, newly built house. bread and butter, meaning for average people, nothing fancy. And I could put 10% down, which is $7,500, which is a pretty small amount. And I could at least, even in the first year, break even. In other words, my carrying costs at least equaled my rent. And then, of course, over time, the rent went up, but the mortgage stayed the same. Today, how do you put 10% down on a house without a negative cash flow?
Well, that's a great question. And we've been examining properties on the channel. There's a lot of areas where it actually pencils out currently. And that's the beauty of it, I think, right now. So let's say we take a property, we take a look at it. We say, okay, with 10% down at today's interest rate, what's our cost to carry? Okay, X, got that. Now, what's the property's estimated rent range? Okay, Z, we got that. Do those meet each other? Or are we at least a little bit under? You know, we don't have to carry a negative. It's at least a break even or a slight positive. Well, that would be awesome. That's the only way to buy property, period, in any market, but especially right now. Because I like that. Because if I can make those numbers work at today's interest rate and lock it in, even at 7%, let's say someday it does. Let's say the Fed does pivot. Well, then you can refinance that loan into a different rate. But the interest rate isn't as important as long as it pencils out. Because if it goes up, well, I got a 7%. If it goes down, well, I refinance. But the realities are that's the only way to buy property right now. When it comes to buying property, you don't want to buy luxury property for rentals. Those did okay in the crisis because rich people were jumping on the sidelines and just jumping into rentals. But, you know, you need your rentals to appeal to the widest range of a renter pool. Well, who's our widest range of a rental pool? It's the blue collar wage earner, the average Joe and Jane out there that just want a good place to live and not get price gouged to do it. So that's why you, like me, I have affordable rentals, studios, apartments, things like that. Rarely do I have tenant turnover. In fact, I always find out who's my competition right now if I have tenant turnover. All right, clean it up, get ready for the next tenant. Let's see what the going rate is currently. Great. Let's beat everybody just by $100 or so. Let's have the best price rental in town, even if it's only by $100, and get every available renter over to this property and then hand pick a high quality tenant. So if you're on the market at the top of the rental market, how many people are going to race over to see your rental? Not many. But if even it's a little bit less, you're going to get a lot of interest, right? So yeah, I mean, right now with, like you said, the US savings rate being at an all-time low, let me repeat, today, most Americans are one flat tire away from a tailspin. That's not good. So, you know, it's really important when buying property. Does it pencil out? Even if it's not a rental, I want to make sure I pulled an insurance policy for myself, even if it's my primary home, that I have the luxury. If something happens to me, if I get that flat tire, a renter goes in, I don't have to lose the asset. And A, or B, maybe Scott Walters in 2 years from now, show me how to put a renter in here and help me buy my next home when I save the down payment for that one. And then over 10 years, I could own a handful of rentals and tell my boss I quit. That's the factor.
You mentioned the blue collar workers. On one of your prior YouTube presentations, I was fascinated when you started talking about all the repos of cars going on. Tell us a little bit about that and what your source of information, what your observation points are on that issue.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So yeah, what we know is typically, I think, is I've learned how to absorb all the data. I'm not a data-driven guy. I'm really basic fundamentals. But, you know, I think one of the things that's been disclosed, and I've learned, is typically if we lose the auto industry repos, the housing market falls 6 months behind. So I had a subscriber, is Tow Truck Terry, in the Midwest, some part of the country. And he's like, Scott, he's like, I'm a tow truck guy, and we are towing repos left and right. Like it's on. It's happening, Scott. And I said, wow. So that just tells me really we're about 6 months away from potentially getting reports that banks are taking homes, because it doesn't have to be on the 6 month mark. Maybe it's the 4 month mark. Maybe it's the 8 month mark. I don't know. But typically when the auto market pops, the housing market follows 6 months behind on average. So yeah, I mean, it's no secret now with the auto industry that's full of reports now that the auto bubbles pop. Now I'm even getting subscribers reaching out to me. I'm a tow guy, and I'm towing repoing cars out here. If anybody's interested, I'm like, yeah, I'm interested. That's a frontline report. That's boots on the ground. That's heat mapping and temperature checking what's really going on, not what mainstream media is telling us what's going on. These are the facts now that are coming in. Insane, the stuff that we unpackage.
What about the shows you've done on foreclosures and tax sales? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we had foreclosure bans, first time in American history where we landlocked the banks from being able to repossess non-paying homeowners. So we kicked the can down the road. So now, because of the run-up in the bubble, some people, if they were forced to market, were still able to satisfy the loan. So the more foreclosures have been artificially skewed, the data will just say. So now we're starting to see what's happening with a lot of Americans is they're not able to satisfy loans. In fact, a lot of Americans, because they actually got hurt in this more than it helped them with their real estate appreciating the way it did. Because if you owned your house free and clear, or had a small mortgage on it, but all of a sudden you suffered, I don't want to say enjoyed, because you only enjoy it if you sell, you suffered doubling the appreciated value of the home, and it got reassessed by its tax base, and now you owe a bigger tax bill. We're seeing people now reports that there's people's homes are being auctioned off for back taxes. They can't keep up with these tax bills now that they're faced with on these properties that went euphoric. There's normal people, and all of a sudden their house went crazy. They didn't know what they're doing. I mean, they could have called me, and I could have got them sold and put a bunch of money in their bank account and shuffled them into some cracker box and let them, enjoy their life with a bunch of cash on the side. They didn't know. They don't know. People don't know what to do. So yeah, I mean, there's a foreclosure crisis apparently brewing. And anytime the housing market exhibits bubble behavior, it's always followed with the crash, and then that leads to foreclosures, and tax sales are now occurring. It's now grabbing mainstream media headlines. Like in San Diego, we're seeing you can go sign up at their website, at their county or city website, and go attend auctioned off homes that are tax sales. They're taking people's homes for back taxes.
We're talking to Scott Walters Real Estate, which is also now associated with Warren Buffett's company, Berkshire Hathaway. Are you a franchisee, or how does that work?
Yeah, so I am. I am part of Berkshire Hathaway's umbrella, and it's an amazing company. It's just been a thrill. When I started in real estate, I started with more of a boutique brokerage in the Rodeo Drive of our area, learned the ropes from the guys over $1 billion in sales. He's an absolute animal. And it was hard. I almost quit the industry because this guy was so high level. I came in like a deer in the headlights, but I was instantly thrusted onto multi-million-dollar listings, doing, basically being his assistant, holding his opens, writing the contracts, driving clients. And I had to look the part, and I had to suit up and show up and just act like I was supposed to be there. And now I ended up going with a big brokerage. And my advice is to anybody, if they're getting in the industry, knowing what I know now, just get in with the biggest brokerage you can find. The training programs, all the resources that are available to you are going to be much higher level later on in your career. If you want to reduce your presence in the industry, maybe just be a referral agent. you can jump in with maybe a small brokerage and avoid some of the dues and fees that are associated with some of the bigger brokerages. But if you're really serious about making it in real estate, jump in with the big dogs. So yeah, it's been really good.
Has California been affected by some of these gigantic corporations that were buying homes? Is that impacted in California?
Yeah, it has. It's impacted everywhere though. But I think, some of the hot spots that we saw, the Phoenixes, the Vegases, a lot of these areas where there's land available to build. A lot of these Lennars, KB Homes, and other, big institutional builders really flooded into the market. Yeah, we've had our share of, foreign investors as well. They want holdings in the U.S. housing market because it's the biggest asset class in the world. The areas where I'm currently sitting today, there's zero land available to buy and build. So investor involvement's little to none here. Maybe you get a flipper or two trying to speculate in these areas. But I think today's bubble is going to be a little different than yesterday's bubble because of contagion. I think what happens in Vegas or Phoenix when we start to see what's going on there, the reverse course, spectacular fashion builders got caught in a game of musical chairs building these projects prior to interest rate hikes. And now those interest rate hikes have rug pulled them and they can't get anybody to tour those model homes, the FOMO factories, I call them. That could have a spillover effect because we're so much more digitally connected now than we were in the previous bubble. Good news travels pretty fast. Bad news tends to travel a little faster. And so like Warren Buffett, you were saying, be greedy when others are fearful when others are greedy. I think in the greed, in the stimulus era, that's when he got on the sidelines and turned a lot of his holdings into cash. And now that fear and panic is sweeping, it's maybe time to deploy that cash.
Yeah, Scott,
yeah,
we have a minute and a half left on Zoom. So in this short time, tell the viewers where they can get the help and contact with an honest broker who will tell them the truth and guide them the way they'd like to be guided by the golden rule. Tell them how to contact you.
Absolutely. And, thank you so much for having me on today. I'm happy to do it again if you'd like. But yeah, my position is always put my clients' needs before my own. I'm willing to earn your business later. If and when you're ready to buy real estate, every piece of real estate is going to exhibit its own opportunity. Deal might be there, it might not. Everything has to be looked at specifically. And we've talked a little bit about that today. You can simply Google Scott Walters Real Estate, and you should see my mug appear on the internet. All on YouTube as the Scott Walters Report. You can even hit me up at Scott Walters Real Estate on Gmail. But if you Google Scott Walters Real Estate, you will find me. Feel free to reach out to me, and I'm happy to help. I have agents all over the nation. Not only an agent, the highest rated agents in the nation, high level agents ready to help you.
Scott, thank you very much. We're running out of time, and I hope to do this again because this was great. And we have many more things to discover and discuss. Thanks a lot.
Thank you,